So my topic is ZTNA and essential cyber hygiene. About me, I've been working for about 30 years, and about half of that in cybersecurity and in networks in general. eBricks, we are our stall right here. We are a cybersecurity services company. We do research and development services for cybersecurity tech companies and also managed security services and solutions. We are also specialists in zero trust architecture strategy and implementation, and we have zero trust network access as the centerpiece of our solutions. So we are going to base our conversation around the Center for Internet Security's community defense model. CIS, if some of you may be familiar with the CIS controls, Center for Internet Security is a non-profit organization of IT professionals that provides guidance on how to implement cybersecurity. And they have these well-known 18 controls, and each control has several safeguards. And the idea is that depending on your risk profile and the size of your organization, you would adopt some of these. The community defense model is meant to provide guidance to organizations for what controls and safeguards to implement given their size and risk exposure. And it's one of the few prescriptions that is data-driven. It's evidence-based. They have data from a lot of authoritative sources like Verizon data breach, MS ISAC, and from other sources of incidents. And on the other hand, they have data about various attack techniques from MITRE, and they tried to map the mitigations proposed by MITRE to the attacks that are observed most commonly in the real world. And they try to measure the efficacy of these mitigations against the most common attacks. So they've basically divided the world into three categories. The implementation group one is the most basic group. It's kind of the lowest common denominator group. It's where pretty much every organization needs to have the controls and the safeguards in implementation group one. And if you are more risk prone, more risk sensitive, then implementation group 2, and for the ultimate security, it's implementation group 3. So out of the 153 safeguards, about 56 are kind of universal, and then about 74 are for the implementation group 2 and 23 for implementation group 3. So they define essential cyber hygiene as the implementation of the CIS implementation group 1. And what they say is that these are the least costly and least difficult to implement. And all organizations, regardless of their size and budget, need to have an implementation of implementation group 1. And there's some data to back up the effectiveness of the implementation group 1 against the most common attacks. So for the top 5 attacks, you'll see that it has 75 to 85% efficacy. So for malware, ransomware, web application hacking, insider threat, and targeted intrusions. And if you have full implementation of all the controls, then it gives you 90 to 98% protection against the most common attacks. Nobody claims that you can get 100% protection against all attacks. Even MITRE has documented attacks with no known mitigations. But this is as good as you get. This is one of the few evidence-based, data-driven recommendations from a non-profit kind of a vendor-neutral source. So that's why, as practitioners, we give a lot of weightage to this, and especially since the CIS controls are relatively a small set of controls, suitable for small to mid-sized enterprises, we base a lot of our advocacy around these. So we are taking the definition of essential cyber hygiene from CIS and those 56 safeguards that they talk about. And now we're trying to see which technologies do you need to buy to implement those safeguards. What's the minimum set of technologies you need? Because some of these safeguards you can implement through process. Some involve capacity building and training your people. And the rest are best implemented through technology. But before we get into those safeguards, we will do a bit of an introduction on zero trust network access and software-defined perimeters. Basically, the idea of a perimeter is the most essential, one of the essential concepts in security. Whatever you want to protect, you want to put a fence around it or a perimeter around it, and you want to control access across that perimeter. So who can come through that perimeter, which users can have access to that perimeter and be allowed in, and who needs to be kept out. That is essentially what security is all about. So essentially, we can boil security down to implementing perimeters and exercising effective controls on those perimeters. So if you have, in order to implement a perimeter, obviously you need to know what assets you want to protect. So having an inventory of assets, what software and hardware you need to protect, who the users are, who needs access to those assets, that has to be known. And then measures have to be put in place that effectively guard your assets against those users and intruders, and so essentially defend the perimeter. So perimeters have become diffuse over time. Your assets are no longer in a physical data center necessarily. They may be in the cloud. And your people are sometimes working in the office, and sometimes they're working from home or somewhere else. So the perimeter has become loose, and so it has to become, there's a need to define it in a software-based manner. So the term software-defined perimeter has come about from the Cloud Security Alliance. They had a specification for software-defined perimeter in 2014, and they have since then updated it to the second specification. But over this period, especially near the pandemic, the term zero trust started gaining more traction, and Gartner coined the term zero trust network access, and that essentially means the same thing. It's software-defined perimeter. Companies that were calling their technology SDP are now calling it ZTNA, but not all ZTNA is software-defined perimeter. There are non-SDP implementations of zero trust network access. We happen to think that ZTNA is a more robust implementation of SDP. SDP is a more robust implementation of ZTNA than some of the alternatives you have. Also, for organizations with more advanced needs, there's a prescription by the US government as well to implement zero trust architecture, and that cites ZTNA as one of the core technologies. If you look at NIST 800-207, that cites ZTNA as one of the implementation approaches for zero trust architecture. So essentially, when you have software-defined perimeters, they look like this, that each user sees, each user essentially has their own perimeters. So these are micro perimeters now. No single user has the same view. You see what you need when you need it. Otherwise, you have no access, no visibility into what's there on the network. So in order to implement zero trust network access technology or a software-defined perimeter, obviously these products have to have certain capabilities. And so having software and hardware asset inventory, having a centralized user inventory, and implementing strong authentication, especially multi-factor authentication, putting a firewall-like capability in front of every resource so that you can create micro-perimeters around them. These are all capabilities that ZTNA needs to implement the core set of capabilities. So if you look at the CIS controls, these are the CIS safeguards that we have mapped to ZTNA. And so there are about 15 safeguards here that span a number of controls. So what you'll see is that some of the most basic controls that are around software and hardware asset inventory and around multi-factor authentication and around deployment of firewalls on endpoints and servers. These are all safeguards that you can implement through ZTNA. They're natural elements of ZTNA technology. ZTNA also gives you the ability to do central management of access, revoking and granting access, seeing who accesses what, and so on. So, and obviously we don't have enough time to go through each one of them, but these are the 56 safeguards, out of which we think that about 8 safeguards are people, so they're around training your people, creating cybersecurity awareness. About 15 safeguards, 15 safeguards are for a small company that can be implemented through reasonable process. But we believe that about 33 safeguards are for technology. So, and out of those, 15 are mappable to ZTNA. Then the others are like malware protection, backups, maybe some sort of secure configuration enforcement. So you'd see that about half of your technology controls are implementable through ZTNA. So again, that was our main premise here was, when people say zero trust network access, they say, okay, zero trust is for big organizations with complex problems. But when you change that term to software-defined perimeters, that is the need for every organization in the modern world, which has things in the cloud and people working from various places. So software-defined perimeters are an essential technology. If I name the top 3 technologies that every organization needs to have, I would put SDP in as one of them. And probably you have some sort of malware protection, and you have some sort of a backup capability for data backup. And there are, we have done more extensive analysis of these controls and mapping them to technologies in the interest of providing guidance to SMEs. And we'd be happy to discuss it in more detail. We can't really go into all of it here. So we have our booth here in 427, right next to this section. So if you're interested, we'd be happy to get more into that. We ourselves have some technology that helps implement this. And in addition to implementation group 1, we have services and technologies that help you through IG2 and IG3 implementation of these CIS controls. And if you're actually adopting zero trust architecture per the CISA maturity model, then again, ZTNA is the core technology that takes you through traditional security to optimal security. So leaving the needs of SMEs and essential hygiene aside for advanced needs as well, ZTNA is kind of the pillar, central, core technology to make that happen. That's it. Thank you.